All right, everyone. We start off today. Yesterday, I got into a fracas with Shoe on Head and mostly a bunch of her fans. She's, more like she wants a left-wing and a right-wing populist, I guess, to go at it, which is Trump and Sanders. I can respect that. It would be an interesting race. I mean, can you imagine how boring it would be if Trump was, going off against Klobuchar? Is it Kamala Harris? Be terrible. Warren would be boring. I think Sanders, it would be funny with Biden because he's incoherent, and that's what I expect likely will happen. That's okay. Sanders is a firebrand, and he's also nuts, so that would be interesting. At least you'd get real contrast in their policies. I think that the Democrats would be completely crippled, and Obama has come out and basically echoed the same sentiment. Say what you want about Obama being establishment Democrat, and it's really funny to see liberals rake Obama over the coals of all people. But he is good at strategy. He does understand that Bernie Sanders would lose. I wanted to point something out, though, because in the context of dealing with some of these fans of hers, some of which have I'm a Nazbol, so sort of handle on Twitter. My pronouns are Z, Zir, and other folk. My pronoun is helicopter. When you start seeing people like that show up to a thread, you know that you've really poked the dumb hornet's nest. Not casting shade on Shu, but some of your fans are far left. I think these are the same ones that call you out every time you say something about TERFs or whatever. Anyway, we got to talk about the reality of fundraising within the 2020 election. The reality is that if you want a grassroots candidate funded largely by small donations, you want Trump, not Bernie Sanders. Trump has gotten more small donors individually, and they kept shifting the goalposts. Like, first I said, Trump has more small donation totals. Then they said, the number of small donors, Bernie Sanders has more. Then I links in the description. You can go to them. You can peruse these for yourself. It's from Open Secrets, so it's not exactly a far-right website or something. Somebody was linking the Daily Kos and crazy shit like that. Or Kos, however you put it. The Daily Cossack. That's how I'm going to term it because it makes sense politically. No, Trump has considerably more small donors, considerably more small donations. That's simply a fact. He's also largely self-funded. His campaign has a considerably larger budget because he keeps loaning his own campaign money. He's been doing this since the 2016 election. It's legal, it's above board, it's his own business money being loaned through the system. There's no problem with this. It's perfectly allowed. He's not asking you for your $5. He's not pulling a Joe Biden and incoherently making a bunch of ads asking you to chip in. Once in a while, he brings up fundraising, and he's done a couple of gala dinners with some rich people. Other than that, primarily, he doesn't really do fundraising. He doesn't seem to need to. He just puts shit on Twitter and the small donations. He probably makes $1 million for his campaign every week just by tweeting. Why the hell does he need to go and suck corporate cock? The idea, by the way, I brought this up as well. Shu pointed this out. He takes big money now too. Bernie Sanders doesn't like to do that. Maybe so. Bernie Sanders will, though, take union money. How's that any different? You get $100 million stacked into some union dues and some unelected bureaucratic bullshitter that in some states represents people even against their will, drains people of their money, and then goes off and lobbies in Congress or funds some political campaign. It's no different. There are super PACs for Bernie Sanders, the same way as for Trump. By the way, that's not even run by the campaign. The truth is, though, this, and the goalposts were attempted to be shifted by one of her fans who said, but Bernie, so here's an article, and the article's like, Bernie Sanders breaks a record for hitting 4 million individual donors, and Bernie Sanders wins. No. Bernie Sanders did very, very quickly, from the time he announced to the time he hit 4 million small donors, that's record time. The overall number of small donors, though, the absolute number, and certainly the total taken in, is far higher for Trump. Millions of additional small donors, number one. Tens of millions of dollars in total small donations, number two. Bernie Sanders also does have money that has come in from big donors. Believe it or not, there are rich people who back Bernie Sanders. The fact that he's not willing to have the $2,000 plate Goldman Sachs meal like Hillary Clinton is definitely to his credit, and I have consistently given him credit for that. I love the fact that he does that. It's opposite Elizabeth Warren, who used to do that all the time, squirreled that money away, and now pretends to be a progressive now by draining tens of millions off a Senate bid that was almost entirely big money. It's to his credit. Trump's basically the same, though. If I want a grassroots candidate, here's the grassroots stack up for 2020, assuming, and this is, by the way, assuming that the term grassroots has any meaning. This is assuming that the inevitability of corporate money in the campaign doesn't tarnish everyone across the board through super PACs alone anyway, which it does. Bernie Sanders has super PACs and billionaire donors. Donald Trump does. One of the Dems in the race right now who's running legendary numbers of ads is richer than Trump is, Michael Bloomberg. Now, of course, Bernie Sanders fans probably don't like him very much. I don't like him either. He's a disingenuous, gun-hating cocksock, but that doesn't mean that he's not there in the Democratic Party. And he's hardly a relic of a past era, unless the past era is the 2000s. I suppose when you get to the point where you hate Obama and call him a Republican, that makes more sense. He's trying to save the Dems from themselves right now because he knows that Sanders and Warren can't win because they've gone too far left to shift back for a general. It's pure political strategy. He's worried about winning, not about my free stuff, my feel-good, hippie-trippy love fest. It's not going to work. Here's the thing. Here's the grassroots stack-up. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Trump, small donations and self-funded. Sanders, largely small donations. Both of them have some PAC and big money activity, but by and large, they're not going out of their way like an Elizabeth Warren or a Clinton to go and wine and dine the billionaire class. Trump doesn't get along with them. Bernie Sanders never has. Trump is one of them, so he can self-fund himself and he doesn't care. So they're both basically grassroots. Shu is correct, and they're both more populistic. Bernie Sanders is proposing a situation in which if he were to get everything that he wanted, somebody like me would be paying probably a 60% tax rate. I don't care if he says, well, it won't require any middle-class tax increases to pay for this program or to pay for that program. There's some fuzzy math, and I'll tell you what none of his fans so far have caught on to. It is true that at least under the kind of fuzzy math he uses for each individual socialistic program he wants, you could pay for it without hammering the middle class. You could just inflate the currency, subsidize the middle and lower classes, like you tax them, but then you give them the money back or something. It's an underhanded way of tax and then give. You're basically giving them their own money back, and usually not as much, but it can be done. The problem is his platform is not just one program. It's not just free healthcare, which is to say tens of trillions of extra dollars over the next 10 years to pay for it. It's not just I'm going to give you free, which is I'm going to give you whatever health care the government decides that you need, and eliminate, by the way, in the process, the public option for union members. Wow, that'll go over wonderfully in the Rust Belt and the Coal Belt. It'll go over Pennsylvania. Let me tell you, if Bernie Sanders is your candidate, you'll lose Pennsylvania by double digits. I guarantee it, because every union will back Trump. I don't care if they endorse him right now. They'll back Trump in the general. It'll be hilarious. He'll lose all the union support. Oh, he'll do well in California and New York City. The problem is there's a whole country between those two places. Bernie Sanders doesn't want just that. He also wants free college, which is to say government will decide, again, the structure of the entire upper education system in the country. Wow, it worked so well for primary education. Our educational ranking hasn't slipped constantly since the 50s when we began regulating that at every possible level in the wake of the New Deal. No problems there. So he ruins the educational system, makes it twice as expensive, so you'll pay for that too. Student loan debt forgiveness. That's a big one. How many billions of dollars are required to take, I think it's several hundred billion, if I remember correctly, in student loan debt. Now, this is the one thing, by the way, for Bernie Sanders I can kind of sort of get on board with, but you know what I'd rather do? And I know this is going to sound terrible to some of the fiscal libertarians out there. It would make more sense to just literally print the money, pay it off, eliminate the concept of student debt entirely, and then go back to an entirely deregulated system to drive the cost down. Yeah, it'd put some people out of business. It'd be a lot less impact than what Bernie Sanders is talking about. There's no other real way around it, because otherwise we're going to end up with a debt bubble that's going to cripple people. Allow them to file for bankruptcy. Everyone else can. Anyone else who goes bankrupt can file bankruptcy, except for students in this country. Problem fucking solved. Let them restructure the debt. Let them deal with parlay with the government or whoever else's cock they have to suck. I know that's terrible, but it's better than the system we have now that's abusing literally everybody. You could try eliminating the woman's studies and the feng shui for your minivan courses. That would be wonderful. By the way, when I say that, people find it funny. That's actually a gag from a Mad Magazine article back in like 1999. People still find it funny 20 years later. There's some lasting power right there. But So, and then I go to Trump. I already know his policies. He's saved me money. I paid a couple thousand less. And by the way, I'll get even more forgiveness on taxes this coming year because the healthcare mandate goes away. I don't have health insurance right now. Well, technically I do while I'm here in the Netherlands. They have these travel plans that you have to buy cheap out and get one. Basically, it's if you die, they'll send your coffin back. That's kind of what it boils down to, because sending human remains transatlantic can get a little expensive when you have to put someone on ice for 12 hours. So, yeah, that's basically what it's for. That or, Antifa breaks my knees backwards or something in a violent rally that rolls down the street. I might need medical care. It'd be funny. The doctor only speaks Dutch. Maybe the doctor's not bilingual. How funny that would be. I'm getting off track. But here's the thing. If I'm in the working or middle class, like if I'm not very poor or so rich that I don't really care about the tax rate, there's no reason for me to back a Sanders bid. And he's not any more grassroots than Trump. If it's just the fact that a person would be small donor and self-funding based and therefore not beholden to a bunch of special interests, dude, Trump has some CEOs he still dines with. Bernie Sanders has some rich bureaucrats that he dines with. Some of these government insiders that he parlays with, the far left crowd, these are dynastic or long-term, lifelong politicians, bureaucratic individuals, and union heads. They are exactly the same as corporate CEOs. They are absolutely for profit. They look out for their own interests first and foremost. Bureaucrats are arguably worse because they can use the legal system to justify their own excess and abuse. And they can vote their own budget increases by weighing in on Congress saying, "Whoa, we need more money." CEOs can't do that unilaterally. They have to convince people, they have to bribe people. They can't just say, "Oh, woe is me," to a bunch of Democrats. The unions have arguably become worse than what the unions were meant to counterbalance against because they became too powerful. That's, the long and short of it. So no, Bernie Sanders is not uniquely a grassroots candidate. Trump is the grassroots candidate. He's got more small donors, more in small donations. The ratio of large donations is arguably lower because he self-funds so much. His self-funding, by the way, this is funny, his self-funding total listed on Open Secrets only looks like a few thousand. But the other category, yeah, that's him signing checks to his own campaign. But he doesn't do it directly because his holdings are mostly property. And so in order to drain that money off, it's actually technically coming from another source, which is the Trump sort of foundation, Trump Incorporated, Trump brand. So it doesn't count, technically speaking, as entirely self-funded, even though it is. He's commanding his own money to be liquidated for his campaign. It's self-explanatory. I think they should probably put a little asterisk on there to explain that to people, because right now it makes it look like he's not self-funding himself, but he is. So yeah. And then some of these people are like, "Well, you'd rather Trump be in office than Sanders." Yeah. No shit, I would rather Trump be in office. He's been in office for several years. The sky isn't falling. The Satan didn't come out of the ground, out of a crater, and start ruling Earth. Look, there are people on the right who said, gay marriage is legal. Satan will come and rule the world. There'll be another depression if Obama wins a second term. This fear-mongering is not unique to the Trump era. The only uniqueness in regards to the fear that people feel right now is the fact that the legacy media, because of Trump's particular attitude and acumen at driving public discourse by making mean tweets and saying weird shit, is solely fixated on him. And their coverage is lopsided and overwhelmingly negative. If Trump were being treated the way that Obama or even Bush were treated by the media, his approval would be in the mid-50s. He'd be coasting to re-election right now. They're trying everything to stop him. When a bunch of billionaire multinationalists are trying to stop the same dude, maybe he is the grassroots outsider. Maybe he's not technically sort of part of the establishment, even though he's the president of the fucking United States. And let me tell you in closing, one last thing, of course. I am acutely aware of Bernie Sanders' snake oil more than almost anybody else in the country. There aren't that many Vermonters. I am a Vermonter. I'm from Vermont, technically born in New Hampshire. I was there for a couple days before coming home from the hospital. I've lived in Vermont most of my life, including the majority of my adult life. I have seen the actual effects of Bernie Sanders' economic policy. Main Street, Vermont is perfect. The mountains and the lakes are clean. Main Street, Vermont is tidy as a pin. You can step back in time by going to Woodstock or Quechee or any of these places. It looks like you stepped into the last century. Wonderful. Go beyond Main Street. Go to the side streets. Go to the gut of Rutland. Go to the dicier parts of South Burlington. Go to some of the technically blighted communities in the spine of the state of Vermont, some of these sort of declining older communities with a lot of fucking wooden floors and in some cases dirt-floored basements in actual Appalachia in the Green Mountains. There's a lot of poverty and a lot of backwardsness in Vermont's economy. It's propped up by extreme levels of taxation and regulation and government dysfunction, and there are plenty of people who slip through the cracks. And the idea that you gave them welfare crumbs so everything's okay is wrong, dude. The private charitable part of Vermont is extreme. I can remember this, like when you're younger, like a teenager, everyone wants you to volunteer for some campaign. Oh, we're going to deliver turkeys, Meals on Wheels. These people need fuel assistance, collecting cans and getting that money for the poor in your community. I did that when I was in NHS in Mill River. One of the big things we did. By the way, funny story before I close here for anyone who's still watching and gives a fuck. It was funny because me and the other dude that we were teamed up to go and find like cans and bottles and stuff to return for money for this, drive that we were doing. It's food shelf. I can't remember how many thousands of dollars we raised. There was this one dude, he's kind of a fat Santa-looking dude with a beer belly, and we show up at his door, he's like, oh, we're collecting like cans and bottles for Mill River NHS, and, do you have any? And the look on his face, he like looked up and gave a little grin, and he walks around to his garage, opens it, says, oh, have fun, boys. The entire garage is like completely filled with Budweiser bottles. And I think it was like, I can't remember how many hundreds of dollars worth of returnables were just in his garage. It was insane. And then one of the other teams, they picked up a keg. They got like $40 in return for that, just for this keg. And I was glad because the dude I was partnered with had a pickup truck. Because if he had like a sedan, like some of the people were using, it would have taken like 20 trips to get all of these bottles. I can't remember how many times we went back to his house. It was most of the day for us. It was a fun work. He offered us beer, by the way. Here we are. Like, I was 19 at the time, so a little bit older, but not even 21. He's going to drive. He's getting offered Budweiser. And it was all Budweiser, too, trust me. Just an interesting story. I don't know. That's about all. Peace out.